There's something in the woods. I had previously posted this story with my wife's account a couple of days ago. I didn't know what we'd seen until someone replied to a different post. I'm gonna start with seemingly unrelated incidents that have led up to this most recent eye-opening experience. About a year ago, I moved my family and I to a home way out in the woods in Tennessee. I want to be brief here, but I need to get this off my chest, and after looking into this matter a little more, I have a lot more details that I think will paint a clearer picture in the end. The nights here can be extremely loud. Between the crickets, the tree frogs, and the cicadas, it can almost be deafening. One night not too long ago, after we moved in, I'd forgotten something in my car and headed outside to get it. The first thing that struck me as odd was that my dog wouldn't go outside with me. My dog goes everywhere with me, as I'm her whole world. But not this night. As I held the door open, she looked out, then looked up at me like nope. So I walked out and shut the door behind me. The second thing that caught me off guard was that there was not a peep. It was dead silent. Still, I shrugged this off and walked down my front steps to my car. When I'd gotten about 10 feet from my car, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt as though something was watching me. I looked around, but saw nothing. After I'd reached in my car for what I'd forgotten to grab earlier, I had this feeling like something was moving towards me. I took a step back and checked around me. All of a sudden, I heard one of the hedges next to me, near my walkway to our front door, rattle. At first, I thought it was a rabbit that I'd spooked, as I had seen one earlier in the day right where this was happening. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of a large rock landing a few feet away from me. It hit the walkway and bounced into a shrub. I drew my weapon and called out to whoever it was. After a few seconds of nothing, I began to think that this was some local teenagers messing with the new people. I put my weapon away, turned to the front door, and started walking back. Almost as soon as I turned towards my house, I heard a deep panting sound. It sounded like a huge dog, but what made me run back to my front door was that it sounded like it was right behind me. I leaped up onto my porch, turned, and pulled the weapon again, expecting something right there, but there was nothing. A couple weeks later, I was on my porch at night, sitting on a bench with my wife. She got up and walked inside to get something, and as soon as she shut the door, I heard that panting sound again. I couldn't see anything, yet this sounded like it was right on top of me. The sound was coming from everywhere, and it was so very loud. Again, I couldn't see anything, so I ran back into my house. Now at this point, I was questioning moving here, but after nothing else really happened, I figured I'd let it go. A month or so later, it was a really rainy and stormy night. This is around 9 p.m. and my wife and I enjoy listening to the rain, so we talked about how relaxing it was. Me growing up in Oregon, I love the rain, and for the past 10 years we lived in Vegas where it would dump the entire year of rain in a day, then be bone dry for the rest of the year. For my wife, who grew up in Nevada, rain was such a rare thing. She loved going outside and watching the rain. So for us, this was an enjoyable experience. Except this night in particular, things took a weird turn. As we were sitting, talking about the rain and relaxing, my wife stopped me and she said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "No. What did you hear?" She said, "I swear it sounded like a small child calling for help out in the woods, right next to our house." I said, "No, I didn't hear anything." After a few moments of us listening intently, she said, "There it is again." And I said, "I didn't hear a thing. Are you sure you're not just hearing stuff?" She looked at me all offended that I didn't hear anything and said, "No, I'm positive. How could you not hear that? It was our son. I think he's out there and he got lost." I said, "No, he's in the house sleeping on the couch." We then both looked through the blinds that were open right behind us, and we could see all of our children laying there. She said, "That's so weird. I swear it sounded like our son." I said, "It isn't him, he's right there. Besides, I don't hear anything." She then stood up and said, "Wow, he's really crying for help. I need to go look for him." Now at this point, if you knew my wife, you would know she's absolutely creeped out by the woods and wouldn't be caught dead walking into them during daylight, much less at night during a storm. I grabbed her hand and said, "I've been listening intently, and there's absolutely nobody calling out for help. You need to stay here." At this point, I was getting worried about her. She was acting completely out of character, not to mention that at this time she's 8 months pregnant with our baby daughter. She then said, "What if there's some child out there lost in the woods?" And then I responded, "Well, first off, I'd be able to hear them too. Secondly, there's no other kids around here for miles, and the odds of them being lost 100 feet from our house that's lit up like a Christmas tree is nil." She then said, "I know, but what if it's just a kid?" Before I could say anything else, she stood up and walked towards the stairs. I jumped up and grabbed her hand again and said, "No, you're not going. Get in the house. I don't know what's going on, but you need to get inside." She then complied, and we both went inside. I didn't know what this was, or what this situation was going to turn out to be, but it freaked me out. A few months after this, just as it was getting dark outside, I heard the front door to our house open, and I got up to investigate. We have autistic 6-year-old twins, and we have the door set up so they can't open it without us there. So to hear this sound, it could only have been my wife. What was weird was the fact that she usually doesn't go outside without saying something to me. I walked out front and saw my wife walking down our private road towards the drive on the side of our house. I asked her, "What are you doing?" And she said she was sitting on my back patio and kept hearing a baby crying out in the woods. I said, "Seriously, and you just decided to walk off into the woods to investigate?" She then looked out into the woods and said, "See, there it is again." Again, I didn't hear anything, but what I did notice was that it was completely silent out again. I told her, just like before, the chances of having a baby being out in the woods outside our house is slim, and she needed to get back inside. She said, "What if someone left a baby out there?" And then I responded with, "Well, if that was true, I would hear it too." Now at this point, I was really starting to worry about my wife's mental health. I actually asked her to see a psychiatrist, and she did. Now looking back, I really feel bad about this knowing what I know. A key to this moment was that my wife had just given birth to a baby girl a month before. A few days after this, we are out front on the porch. It's early evening, and I just mowed the lawn this day. Our 3-year-old son was riding his little car in front of the house. Now he knows that he's not allowed outside of a certain area that we mapped off, but he loves playing outside. With the road 50 feet behind him from our porch, we have to be careful as a lot of boaters will fly through after drinking all day on their boats. As we were talking, we were both keeping an eye on him. A neighbor drove by and stopped to say hi for a second. This interaction took approximately 8 seconds, as all they said was, "How are things?" while we said, "Good," and he told us they would stop by later as his wife got something for the kids, who happens to be one of their teachers in school. We said, "Okay, great," and he drove off. I looked over to where our son was, and he was gone. I called out his name and ran over to the side of the house and could hear his car on our side drive. I scolded him for leaving the area, and he said something in his 3-year-old gibberish and pointed to the woods behind our house. I said he had 5 seconds to get back up to the front of the house or else, and he adamantly pointed back in the direction of the woods and kept trying to tell me something. I looked off in the direction of the woods and just assumed he saw a deer or squirrel or something and wanted to see it up close. I walked him back up to the front of the house and he cried the whole way there. He got really upset that I wouldn't let him go into the woods, but I just wrote this off as him being curious, as most 3-year-old boys are. Now this incident isn't isolated, as our twins have done similar things, but nothing quite as extreme as this.